The house will be in order. The prayer will be offered by the guest chaplain, Pastor Craig Pridgeon from True Bethel Baptist Church, Niagara Falls, New York.
Let us pray. How can I say thanks for the things that you have done? The voices of 1,000,000 angels cannot express our gratitude. All that we are and ever would hope to be, we owe it all to thee. To God be the glory for the things you have done. It is in the stillness of a room steeped in tradition that we pause to invite your presence. I pray your continued guidance for those whom you have perfectly placed in these hallowed seats. As the psalmist declared, how wonderful and pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in unity. Despite the differences of political affiliation, demographic, gender, or ethnicity, we stand together in this house of the people in unity, one nation under God. In the name of the one who is able to do exceeding abundantly above all we could ask or think. Amen.
The chair has examined the journal of last day's proceedings and announced to the House the approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Alford.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Higgins, is recognized for 1 minute.
To recognize today's guest chaplain, my friend, Pastor Craig Pridgeon. Pastor Pridgeon serves as the senior servant at True Bethel Baptist Church in Niagara Falls. Through his ministry and community service, he is an energetic and effective advocate for those who have none, who have been doubted, underappreciated, and forgotten. Buffalo born and raised, Pastor Pridgeon has led efforts to promote opportunity through a church-led workforce development program, as well as understanding and equality through his position on the board of the National Federation of Just Communities. He has also supported community building and wellness initiatives as president of the Niagara Falls Ministerial Council and a senior advisor for Buffalo's Comprehensive Cancer Center, Roswell Park. We are grateful to have Pastor Craig Pridgeon in the House chambers for today's opening prayer, and so very fortunate to have him leading by example in all of Western New York. I yield back.
The chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, the question is consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of a beloved community member, a man of faith, brave veteran, and a valued friend, Donnie Fleming. Characterized by his grace and gratitude, Donnie was a lifelong resident of St. Mary's, Pennsylvania. Donnie peacefully passed away surrounded by family earlier this month. He was a staple of his community and dedicated to uplifting those around him. Whether it be the family, friends, or those in need, Donnie ingrained himself in his community as a civil servant and business leader. He was a powerful force amongst the local organization, such as the Boys and Girls Club, United Way, the Cleveland Clinic, and Christ the King Manor. Donnie exemplified what it means to devote oneself not only to his community, but to his country. He was a recipient of both the Purple Heart and the Silver Star medals, and I thank him for his committed service and sacrifice, not only to his community, but to our great nation. I offer my condolences to Donnie's wife, Elaine, and family, and hope that his profound impact instills the importance of kindness and generosity for us all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back to the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This past weekend, families across the country, including my own, celebrated Mother's Day. Many of us honored the extraordinary women in our lives with a call or brunch or flowers. These are all lovely gestures, but if you ask a mom what she wants for Mother's Day, there's a good chance she'll say peace of mind. because a call doesn't give a mother time off from work to recover from childbirth and bond with her newborn. Brunch won't provide mental or physical health care. Flowers won't babysit or teach our children the alphabet. This chamber must do more for moms. What they need are things like paid family leave to close the wage gap, access to basic women's health care, closing the coverage gap, and eradicating bias from medicine to save the lives of women, especially Black women. Quality, affordable child care, universal pre-K to give our generation a strong educational foundation, and peace of mind that their child will not be blown away by gun violence. Mothers are telling us what they need. I just hope by next Mother's Day we listen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize our nation's law enforcement officers. They serve as a human shield between peace and chaos, preserving our way of life and upholding the rule of law. Our police officers are the first people we call when we're in danger. When our safety is threatened, they respond without hesitation. Their unwavering commitment to public service and willingness to confront the unknown is a testament to their strength and their humanity. We also must remember that our police officers are not just uniformed personnel. They are our neighbors, our friends, our family. They share our joys, our sorrows, our dreams, and our challenges. They deserve not only our gratitude, but also our unwavering support. So as we observe National Police Week, let's honor those dressed in blue who put their life on the line each and every day for us. Because when we are standing united, when we support those who protect us, we maintain peace, we maintain safety, and we strengthen the bond that makes us one nation, indivisible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Take permission to speak for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Okay. Can you see it? Let me get it. Okay. Meet Janet, a constituent of mine from the Uptown neighborhood in Chicago. She is 64 years old and is on Social Security disability. She suffers from chronic mental illness that prevents her from working. Even though she'd prefer to work, she really is unable to do so. Janet will be devastated by the Republicans holding our economy hostage. She has $1,200 per month, and that is her total income. Social Security, and she has no other income. If we do not pass a clean debt ceiling bill, Janet will not be able to pay for her medication. She will not be able to get food. She will not be able to pay her rent. There are millions of Janets around this country, and we say that don't hold Janet hostage. With that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and service of Noah Jacob Shenavas, an Indiana police officer who was killed in the line of duty last year. Noah would have turned 25 today. Noah was born in Indianapolis to Matt and Lori Shenavas. After graduated from Fishers High School, he enlisted in the Army, where he served as a sergeant and was awarded the Distinguished Air Assault Badge. He was deployed to the Middle East and 2 border missions. Following his honorable discharge, Noah answered the call to service once again and joined the Elwood Police Department in August of 2021. On behalf of Indiana 5th Congressional District and our nation, I share my deepest appreciation and gratitude for Noah's service to our republic. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask for a moment of silence to remember Noah and heroes who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. You will not be forgotten. I yield back.
Purpose does the gentlewoman from the great state of Kansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker,
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May is Mental Health Month. When we think about health in general, we normally think of physical bodies. When someone is hurt, we can often tell. I did mixed martial arts, and I know a little thing or two about physical hurt. But the thing is, we can't always tell when someone in our lives is struggling internally. Mental and emotional health is health. And especially after the difficult and isolating years of the pandemic, it is absolutely critical that we treat it as such. This month and every month, I encourage folks to check in on your families, your neighbors, your friends. I know I'm going to do the same. If you or someone you know needs help, we have some amazing local organizations in the Kansas 3rd, like Zero Reasons Why or the Johnson County Mental Health Center, who are ready to assist you however they can. Or you can call 988 to speak with a trained counselor. Finally, to our youth who may be struggling right now, I see you. And even on the toughest days, please know that you're not alone. Please don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm going to keep working to improve access to mental health so folks in Kansas and around the country can have the resources that they need to take better care of themselves and their loved ones. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, George, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week is National Police Week, and I want to recognize all the brave officers, the men and women who risk their lives and their safety every day to protect and serve our communities. Average citizens try very hard to stay away from certain types of people: murderers, rapists, drug dealers, gang members, domestic abusers, many I call dirtbags. These are the people our police officers deal with every day in the line of duty. They run towards danger when the rest of us run away. They take criminals off our streets. They bring justice to our country. They protect us no matter what. They even protected the wave of anti-police protests that have been happening across our nation. Imagine that. That takes true integrity and dedication to their work. We all benefit from their service, and we need to back them up however we can. I'm incredibly grateful for our law enforcement, especially the local sheriff's office and police departments, and my good friends at the state trooper's office in Tennessee's 2nd District, who work so hard to keep us safe from these bad people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the remainder of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our ally in the Middle East, Israel, has suffered even more rocket attacks from Hamas terrorists. Hamas, as usual, is launching rockets from civilian population centers and using those civilians as human shields. We hear a lot of talk these days about 15-minute cities. Israelis live 15 seconds from a shelter. That's how they have to live their life if they're within the range of the rockets, which are becoming more and more wide-ranging over the territory of Israel. Now, if a terror organization in Mexico, for example, were firing rockets into cities in Texas and Arizona, the United States would certainly be expected to retaliate with military force. This is the case with Israel. It must protect its citizens from indiscriminate rocket attack. They are not to blame for any casualties that might be caused in that conflict. Indeed, the blame squarely lies at the feet of Hamas and other terror organizations who believe in the use of violence to achieve their goals. Israel, in good faith, gave over the Gaza in a land for peace deal, yet no sooner was the ink wasn't even dry than they started stacking rockets in Gaza and launching them at Israel. The United States must continue to support Israel's right to exist and defend itself from aggression. As our most powerful partner in the Middle East, we owe it to them.
Time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Buck, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 398, I call up the House Concurrent Resolution 40, expressing support for local law enforcement officers and condemning efforts to defund or dismantle local law enforcement agencies, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the concurrent resolution.
House Calendar Number 18, House Concurrent Resolution 40. Concurrent resolution expressing support for local law enforcement officers and condemning efforts to defund or dismantle local law enforcement agencies.
Pursuant to House Resolution 398, the concurrent resolution is considered as read. The concurrent resolution shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority members of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees. After 1 hour of debate, it shall be in order to consider the amendment printed in Part C of House Report 118-59 if offered by the member of designated in the report, which shall be considered read, shall be separately debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and the opponent, and shall not be subject to the demand for a division of the question. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Buck, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Colorado.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to insert extraneous material on House Concurrent Resolution 40.
Without objection.
I yield myself such time as I may use.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, House Concurrent Resolution 40 expresses our support for the brave men and women who serve in law enforcement across our nation. These individuals put their lives on the line every single day to protect our communities and keep us safe. And it is time that we acknowledge their selflessness and dedication. Law enforcement officers are the backbone of our justice system. They are the first line of defense against crime, and they work tirelessly to ensure that our neighborhoods are safe places to live, work, and raise families. While most people fear danger and flee, police officers rush towards the threat, and they do so without hesitation or reservation. They are truly the embodiment of courage and bravery. Unfortunately, over the past several years, we have seen an unprecedented level of hostility towards law enforcement in this country. The defund the police movement greatly fueled this hostility. We have seen police officers subjected to unwarranted scrutiny, harassment, and even violence. We have seen protests turn into riots, with law enforcement officers becoming targets of angry mobs. This kind of behavior is not only unacceptable, but it is also dangerous and destructive. It undermines the very fabric of our society and puts innocent lives at risk. As a former prosecutor, I am acutely aware of the vital role that law enforcement plays in keeping our communities safe. I have seen firsthand the sacrifices that these men and women make, and I am truly grateful for their service. That is why I am committed to doing everything in my power to support our law enforcement officers and to ensure that they have the resources and tools they need to do their jobs effectively. They are the unsung heroes of our communities, and we owe them a debt of gratitude that can never truly be repaid. Let us work together to ensure that they have the support they need to continue their important work and to keep our neighborhoods safe for generations to come. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of this measure, and I yield back. I reserve. I'm sorry.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this resolution is nothing more than empty rhetoric designed to score political points. It does nothing to help our law enforcement officers to do their jobs. It does nothing to solve crimes or promote justice. It does nothing to take deadly weapons like those used to target law enforcement off our streets. And it does nothing to make our communities safer. It is also wildly misleading, full of incendiary rhetoric that does not match reality. And very conspicuously, it even fails to recognize the service and contributions of federal, state, or tribal law enforcement officers. It's worth remembering that when the Republicans passed their rules package at the beginning of the Congress, it included several supposedly ready-to-go-on-day-one bills. An earlier version of this resolution was included in that list, but it never made it to the floor, and now we know why. The problem is that the original version praised all law enforcement, not just local law enforcement, as this resolution does. Why was that a problem? Because, as we have learned in recent months, House Republicans now support defunding the police at the federal level. Don't take my word for it. Chairman Jordan told Fox News that he wants to, quote, look at the appropriations process and limit funds going to some of these agencies, close quote. He later made clear that he was referring to the FBI and the Department of Justice. Mr. Biggs has called directly for defunding those agencies, and Mr. Gates has introduced a bill that would eliminate the ATF altogether. Limiting the resolution to local law enforcement also helps Republicans paper over an embarrassing split in their caucus over whether even to recognize the contributions of our brave Capitol Police officers who protected us on January 6th. I would remind members that 41 Republicans voted against awarding Congressional Gold Medals to the Capitol Police officers and the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department in recognition of their service on January 6th. That must be why the resolution states that violent leftist extremists have attacked law enforcement, but it makes no mention of the violent mob of far-right extremists and white supremacists that stormed the Capitol that day, injuring 140 police officers, with 5 officers losing their lives in the days after. H. Conres 40 is a hopelessly misleading resolution that omits crucial context and ignores crime trends in the country, including the disturbing rise in gun violence and the higher per capita murder rate in states won by Donald Trump. But while Republicans want to talk tough with non-binding resolutions about funding the police, local police that is, it was Democrats who passed bill after bill last Congress to actually fund and support the police. So where were Republicans when Democrats went about the serious work of legislating? When given the opportunity to put action behind their cheap rhetoric, time and again Republicans voted no. For example, last Congress, Democrats advanced the Invest to Protect Act, which would have authorized $300 million in grants to law enforcement agencies with fewer than 125 officers to smaller localities. This legislation passed with bipartisan support, but 55 Republican members voted against it. Democrats also advanced the Victim Act, led by Congresswoman and former Police Chief Val Demings, which would have provided grants totaling up to $100 million per year to law enforcement agencies to help them solve violent crimes and close outstanding cases. 178 Republicans voted against it. Democrats advanced the assault weapons ban, which was supported by the Major Cities Chiefs Association and the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, because they know that these weapons of war are used to murder law enforcement officers and to terrorize our communities. Nearly every Republican voted no. House Democrats worked with Republican Senator John Cornyn, not someone known to be soft on crime, to pass the Law Enforcement De-Escalation Training Act, a bill that increases safety for law enforcement and community members alike. This bipartisan bill passed the Senate by unanimous consent, but when it came to the House, 159 Republicans voted against it. This is not and never has been a serious approach to legislating. Mr. Speaker, H. Conres 40 is a wasted opportunity to advance meaningful legislation that would support the men and women of law enforcement who put their lives on the line every day to keep us safe. I urge my colleagues to oppose this resolution, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the Speaker, and I just want to mention in response to the gentleman from New York's remarks about empty rhetoric, this bill, this resolution, says that Congress recognizes and appreciates the dedication and devotion demonstrated by the men and women of local law enforcement who keep our communities safe, and condemns calls to defund, disband, dismantle, or abolish the police. Hardly empty rhetoric when we are thanking America's finest for the work that they do to protect us. I also appreciate the distinction that the gentleman tried to make, and the great difference that we have when Democrats across this country called for defunding local police departments. They did so in the face of rising crime. And what was the congressional response to the colleagues in various parts of the country embarrassing members, Democrat members in the House? Of course, they did what Democrats do so well. They threw money at a problem. They tried to cover up the embarrassment of defunding police at a time when rising crime was occurring by throwing money at a problem. We are now faced with $31.5 trillion of debt because of strategies like that. And we have to recognize that that no longer works. And yes, there were Republicans who stepped up and voted, knowing that the vote might cause some commercials, some other issues about how they don't support police, when the reality is that an overwhelming percentage of police funding comes from local government, as it should. As it should. And finally, the ranking member talks about how there have been efforts with some of my colleagues to hold federal agencies responsible for their actions, to make sure that federal agencies don't overstep their authority. At one point in time, the civil libertarians in this country were on that side of the aisle. Now it appears that the ATF, the FBI, and other agencies can overstep their authority and not be held accountable. It's a sad day when we can't come together and agree that this country is stronger and better when we don't allow the federal government to spy on our citizens, to interfere with political campaigns, and to otherwise disrupt our normal life outside of their law enforcement functions. Mr. Speaker, I recognize my good friend from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for allowing me to speak on this issue today. It's an important issue. I remember my first town hall after I was elected to Congress. We had 1,000 people show up, many of them wearing resistance t-shirts, the radical left busing people in from actually California to protest my town hall. That was fine. That's what it's about. What wasn't fine was the ridiculous number of threats to me, my family, and my staff. And that's when I remembered from days in my legal practice my gratitude for the police who came and made sure that the crowd was protected, my staff was protected. They even placed two undercover police officers flanking my wife because she had been threatened as well. Thank you. Thank you to the men and women of law enforcement. I thank the police chiefs and the rank and file in Apache Junction and in Mesa and Chandler and Gilbert and Queen Creek and Maricopa County. Sheriff's a Democrat, but I think he does a pretty good job. Not like some of the other folks that I'll be talking about in just a minute. I thank the sheriffs and their departments and local law enforcement and the border communities in Yuma County, Cochise County, Pinal County, who are having to take up the slack because of what's going on the border, that the Biden administration is allowing people to just run rampant across our border. It's unbelievable. I thank them. They don't run away. They run toward to save us. They run toward the people who would harm us, and they provide the rule of law. And you can't have freedom if you don't have respect and rule of law. Now let's talk about the federal agencies for just a second. Story just came out last weekend that the bomber who put the bombs over at NRCC and DCCC on January 6th, those were inert bombs. Turns out the FBI has had surveillance and film of that person placing those inert bombs, had video of them moving around on the metro, moving on out to suburban D.C. area, getting into a car. They have the license plate of the car. They have the tracking. They have the credit card that paid for the metro that bomber used. When they went to try to investigate, leadership in the FBI halted that investigation. The Durham report has come out. And any objective analysis of that report, I urge you to read it. I've heard some of you talk about it. I'm not sure you read it. Any objective analysis will tell you that you had the DOJ and the FBI working with the Clinton campaign to create a false criminal allegation that we're still talking about the Russian hoax. It's unbelievable. Yeah, it is unbelievable. And as some have said, the DOJ and the FBI abandoned their standards from the start. They had no predicate for that investigation, and they knew it at the time. And I think we should hold them accountable. You want to keep funding them? Fine, you keep funding them. But you're going to have to reform them some way, somehow. And I, like my friend from Colorado, remembers the time that it was the Democrats who often called for civil liberties and the protection of civil liberties from the federal police apparatus, and that's where I am. We've now come to a point where we have to protect our citizens from our own federal police apparatus. I will also get into this notion of federalizing the police. You can't simply always throw federal grant money at the local law enforcement. They will tell you, we view, at least in Arizona, when I talk to our friends in policing there, they'll tell you, we take this money with trepidation because the feds always want to take over. They don't understand, and I will just tell you, we don't understand what Seattle, why would you come to Congress and say, you control policing in Seattle, you control it in Phoenix, or you control it in the town of Gilbert? Why would we turn that over to the feds? That is too much. And now I just want to share some comments that we've heard over the last couple of years from some of my colleagues across the aisle. From the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, with reducing the NYPD budget, stating, quote, there should be substantial cuts to the police budget and a reallocation of those funds to where we need them, close quote. The minority leader, asked on CNN, expressed his openness to defunding the police when he said, you have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. Cori Bush, she was the vice chair of the crime subcommittee. She said, it's not a slogan. Defunding the police is not a slogan. She said, it's a mandate for keeping our people alive. Defund the police. When she was challenged about that, she further said, quote, defund the police is not the problem. She continues to always double down on that. The gentlelady from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, also said, this is what happens when leaders sign blank check after blank check to militarize the police, CBP, etc., while letting violence go unchecked. We need answers. We need to defund. And when New York decided to cut $1 billion from their police force, Representative Ocasio-Cortez thought the cuts did not go far enough, stating, defund the police means defunding the police. Representative Jamal Bowman, he said, we don't need police with lethal weapons carrying out routine traffic stops. Reallocate police funding to unarmed traffic forces to remove even the possibility of state-sanctioned manslaughter. Representative Jayapal said it is completely reasonable for us to shift significant resources from law enforcement and investing in people, close quote. Representative Ilhan Omar said, we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department because here's the thing, there is a cancer. The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten to the root, and so when we dismantle, we get rid of that cancer. Representative Ayanna Pressley said the defund movement isn't new. Folks are just finally listening. Representative Tashida Tlaib said, when we say defund police, what we mean is people are dying and we need to invest in people's livelihoods instead. Yeah. So, don't tell me now that you can't vote for this resolution, which honors local police enforcement and condemns the defund police movement. Don't tell me that's idle rhetoric. That's real, that's sincere, and that ought to be what the position of this body is. And with that, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Reserved.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the previous speaker referred to some remarks I made, and they were accurate. And what I said was that substantial resources should be taken from the police and given to mental health services. And that was done. About $1 billion was taken from the police department in New York City by the city council and the mayor and given to mental health services. And that made sense. Why? Because when someone is acting out on the subway, when someone is threatening on the subway, what you usually need is a mental health professional there, not a policeman who doesn't know how to handle it. And since a lot of resources were devoted to mental health, the situation in the subways generally and on the streets has gotten much better. It has worked. I can't speak for anybody else, but I can say that when the gentleman says we should honor local police, he is also saying we should not honor federal police. And this resolution does not honor federal police, does not honor the ATF or the FBI or the thousands of federal law enforcement officers, the law enforcement officers who protected us on January 6th from a far-right attack. It talks about leftist violence, but it refuses to talk about right-wing violence. It is not a balanced or fair resolution. It seeks to give a distorted picture of what is going on in this country, and that is why we cannot support it. Having said that, I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Nadler. I served the first 3.5 years of my legal career in the police department. I had a badge and a gun. I know policemen as well, if not better, than almost anybody in this body. I tried to give them a gun yesterday because there was a bill on the floor to let them take their revolvers with them when they retired in good standing. But no, the Republicans had it amended to where they could also take automatic weapons and didn't have to be in good standing. We can't do things purely for the police. This situation, I offered an amendment to advocate the positions of the International Association of Chiefs of Police and other police organizations to say that we should have limits on weapons on the streets, on armored piercing bullets, and on assault weapons. Police don't want those on the streets against them. Yet it wasn't allowed to be heard. It was offered twice again by Mr. Cicilline. It wasn't allowed to be heard. Just like when children are killed, just like when people are killed in clubs, just like people are killed in churches, people are killed in Las Vegas on the streets, this is thoughts and prayers, because the NRA and the concern of people having guns and bullets comes before police and their protection. This is thoughts and prayers, and it's Police Memorial Week light. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, before recognizing the next speaker, let me also point out that this resolution also claims that progressive politicians actively encourage resentment toward local law enforcement. And when we tried to remove such misleading claims during the markup, Republicans said no. We tried to unite behind what should have been the point of this resolution, support of all law enforcement, without language that shamed or demonized members or misled Americans. But Republicans refused, and that's another reason we have to oppose this amendment. I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this resolution, and I do so sadly because there are many things that my good colleague across the aisle from Colorado and I agree on and work on. This is unequivocally not one of them. And the reason I am so distraught by this resolution is because I am the proud chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We are a caucus of 102 members in this body. We have done many wonderful things for our constituents and people across the country. And in fact, we've even worked with the Freedom Caucus, the gentleman from Arizona, to take on some things around accountability of law enforcement, around surveillance, around privacy rights, many issues that we agree on.
But the characterization of progressives within this resolution make it absolutely impossible to support the resolution. And I think, unfortunately, that is the point that my friends are trying to make. They are trying to make us vote against a resolution that supports law enforcement by inserting these provisions that are characterizations that are absolutely harmful and encourage hate against us as progressives representing our constituents. Now, we already passed a resolution honoring law enforcement this week, but this resolution literally makes it impossible for us to support. And I want to raise a couple of points about this. Holding law enforcement accountable, my colleague from Arizona said we want to hold federal law enforcement accountable. Well, that is exactly what Democrats sought to do when we passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which not a single Republican voted for. We need accountability of all of our agencies at all levels. That doesn't mean we don't appreciate the work that those agencies do. We absolutely do. And as somebody who experienced violent threats against my life and my family's life, with a man showing up with a gun at my house, and I was defended by our local law enforcement, and I am incredibly grateful to them. I resent the characterization that somehow we progressives do not support law enforcement just because we want to have accountability in our communities so that black and brown people can walk down the streets and feel safe. Now, in addition, this is not about honoring law enforcement, because last week I tried to introduce a resolution that said if we're going to honor law enforcement, or an amendment, in committee, that said if we're going to honor law enforcement, then let's honor the brave men and women of the United States Capitol Police and all of the levels of local, state, federal law enforcement that defended us in this body on January 6, 2021. When a violent group of right-wing MAGA extremists came and launched an insurrection against this body. I was trapped in the gallery right there in those seats. Long after other people were evacuated from the gallery, some of my friends—
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Gentlelady, an additional minute.
The gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Some of my friends and I were trapped there. We saw everything happen. And so I introduced an amendment to honor those federal law enforcement people. And you know what? Republicans could have taken it and voted against it if they wanted to show where they stand, but they didn't. They hid behind a ridiculous assertion of germaneness and essentially silenced our voices. So I think we have to be real about what this resolution is. And with great respect to my friend from Colorado, we want accountability of all agencies. They want to defend federal law enforcement. We want to honor all law enforcement, including those that defended us here at the Capitol on January 6th. Let my Republican colleagues call out that it was an insurrection on January 6th, and that our federal law enforcement and local law enforcement that defended us here deserve the same honor that they are planning to give to local law enforcement. Let's just honor all law enforcement, and let's take out the references to progressives, which I take great offense to. And so I vote no on this resolution, and I call on my colleagues to vote no on this partisan and, frankly, hypocritical resolution. Thank you.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Just want to quote my good friend from the state of Washington. Quote, law enforcement as a whole has a culture of brutality that you cannot deny if you look at all of these incidents. Most of the protesters are calling for a complete transformation of policing. And then, to paraphrase, this reporter writes, Jayapal said that governments should shift significant sums of money from police and place it in other community-based programs. I am happy to work with my friend and co-sponsor a January 6th resolution of some type, thanking the police officers. Outside my door, in my office in the Rayburn building, there is a thank you Capitol Police sign. There is a flag representing the dedication that police officers have flying outside my door. I absolutely thank the Capitol Police for their hard work. I do think, and I actually think that I probably will work with my friend on this also, I do think we need to look at what the FBI has done and ATF and some other agencies in a fair, responsible, nonpartisan way and address some of those issues. Some of my colleagues have started that process with an appropriations angle. That's something that I will look at. I may support, I may not. You may probably not. But we have other ways to deal with federal law enforcement that has overstepped. And I also agree with my friend that an overwhelming percentage of federal law enforcement agents are great, hardworking people who protect us from foreign terrorists, who protect us from all sorts of violence in this country, organized crime, other things that aren't dealt with as well at the local level. And I appreciate what they've done. The leadership in some of those agencies has gone astray, in my opinion, and that's why we need to take a serious look at them. But I thank my friend for her comments, and I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to hear that the gentleman from Colorado wants to honor federal law enforcement personnel who defended us on January 6th and otherwise also, which leads me to the question of why the Republicans refused to let us have an amendment to that effect in committee. I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my longtime friend, the distinguished chair of the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Nadler. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the thousands of brave men and women of federal, state, and tribal law enforcement that were intentionally left out of the resolution before the House, H-Con Res 40, by the Republican majority. That includes, as has been described, omitting the United States Capitol Police, who heroically defended this very chamber on January 6th from armed insurrectionists intent on disrupting the peaceful transfer of power in this nation, who gave life and limb to defend the American democratic experiment. That, to me, is worthy of recognition in this resolution. It is the very least we should and could do. I'm privileged to serve as the ranking member of the Committee on House Administration, the committee charged with ensuring the safety and security of all who work and visit here. This week, my committee heard testimony from the Chief of the United States Capitol Police. The Chief testified about the enduring impact that January 6th has had on the force and the physical and mental scars the officers still carry. How did the committee's majority respond? They blamed the department. They didn't blame the former president who urged his supporters to come to Washington, claiming that he would march to the Capitol with them. They didn't blame the insurrectionists that came armed with guns, knives, tasers, and used poles bearing the American flag to viciously beat Capitol Police officers. They didn't blame the elected officials that were complicit in the former president's corrupt scheme to retain power. No, they blamed the department. Since my colleagues across the aisle won't do it, allow me to do it. To every one of the nearly 2,000 sworn Capitol Police officers, thank you. You deserve to be in this resolution. And we thank you not just for your actions on that day, but for every single day. We have your backs just as you always have ours. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized. The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to talk about what this resolution is really about. And no, it's not just about supporting local law enforcement, but it's also about trying to attack and vilify the Black Lives Matter movement and the activism that helped shape our nation and help us more clearly see the injustices carrying out in our communities. In 2020, I myself was on the forefront of this movement. Alongside the world, I watched online outraged over the killing and lynching of George Floyd, a man who did not deserve to die at the hands of a police chokehold while he called out for his mother. Alongside the world, I was outraged over the loss of Breonna Taylor, a young woman who deserved to not be shot dead in her own home. And like millions across this country, I marched for change, marched to fight for our voices to be heard, marched to fight for a world where that injustice does not exist, and marched in a non-violent way alongside my community in Central Florida. I saw the pain and the hurt of so many who had spent their lives living in a nation where they feared their well-being every time they stepped outside of their home due to negative interactions with law enforcement. Not every interaction, but many interactions. And we fought for public safety that centers the community so we can truly tackle crime and conditions that breed it. And I believe then what I believe now. The color of your skin and how much money you have in the bank should not determine the treatment you get in the eyes of the law. The color of your skin and how much money you have in the bank should not be a determining factor of whether you live or die. No one deserves to die because they are black. No one deserves to die because they are poor. And yet today we're voting on a resolution that does nothing but to divide us as a country. Does nothing to really support police and everything to do with vilifying a movement of people, trying to rewrite history to make what was a global, mainly non-violent protest seem evil. And you can pass all the sham resolutions you want, but you cannot take away our stories, because I remember being tear gassed, maced, arrested, and jailed on the streets of my own hometown. And today, I get to represent those same streets in the United States Congress. You cannot whitewash this history. These stories live on, and Black Lives Matter. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Kamala Gerdove.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to strongly oppose this resolution, a deeply partisan messaging tactic from House Republicans who are more focused on inflaming divisions in our country than on working for the American people. If Republicans cared about public safety, they would work to address the gun violence epidemic in our nation, which even law enforcement says is out of control. And if they really cared about law enforcement, they would not try to defund agencies like the AFT and the FBI. This resolution is harmful and misleading. Violent leftist extremists and progressive politicians do not want to defund law enforcement. This characterization is a corrupt narrative that runs counter to the real conversations that Americans want to have about the issues their communities face. The true irony here is that in the same breath that they denounce these so-called violent leftist extremists, they stay silent on the extremists from their own party that stormed the Capitol and attacked the United States Capitol Police. Men and women still working here today, disrespected every single day by my colleagues' silence on this issue. Republicans are wasting time with empty bills and malignant rhetoric. Yes, absolutely, we should be investing in people's livelihoods. Why is that wrong? How come we cannot support good public safety and work to keep people alive? All people. A study just came out yesterday that said black people are twice as likely to die than anyone else just because we are black. And that includes interacting with law enforcement. I respectfully ask that we vote no on this resolution. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to make one thing absolutely clear. There is not a single Republican in the United States House of Representatives, to my knowledge, that does not condemn the violent acts on January 6th. Period. End of story. If somebody wants to work on a resolution condemning the violence on January 6th, I welcome that, and we'll work with them. But let's not talk about January 6th when we're talking about a bill that is designated and intended to complement and uplift those who have been the targets of really destructive action in terms of the defund the police movement. Now, I've heard my good friend from Washington, one of the leaders of the Progressive Caucus here in the House, say that progressives were not involved in that. That's fine. The progressives in the House, we've quoted who we've quoted, but certainly the leftists in this country moved to defund the police. They succeeded, and as a result, we have seen rising crime, we have seen more victims, and nobody on their side, nobody takes accountability for the fact that there are more murder victims, there are more robbery victims, there are more people getting their cars hijacked. There are more crimes being committed in this country as a result of failed leftist policies. So you want to talk about January 6th, let's work together and thank the Capitol Police. You want to talk about defunding the police, you want to talk about how we need to uplift the police for their great work, then we need to pass this resolution, and I reserve.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear the gentleman from Colorado say he's interested in a resolution praising the Capitol Police and so forth, which makes it all the more puzzling why the Republicans refused to let us consider an amendment to that effect to this resolution in committee. I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Yeah. Let me thank the ranking member for being so eloquent on where we are today. Let me read the headline of this legislation, H-Con Res 40, expressing support for local law enforcement officers. Broadly supported all across America. Every day we are supporting our local law enforcement, but as well, we are supporting our federal law enforcement that are right in my district today holding a meeting. Men and women who put their lives on the line. I don't know why we couldn't, on this last day of Police Week, as we began the week, as I indicated and repeat over and over again, that I was there for this ceremony that I've gone to every year that has honored those who have fallen in battle. They had everyone represented. Everyone was in brotherhood and sisterhood. Everyone was embracing families and those in law enforcement. No one asked for your Democratic ticket or your Republican ticket. All they were grateful for is you had come to honor and recognize the importance of the work that they do. This could have been a place where we showed to the nation the reasoning of our hearts and our minds. We offered an amendment, I did, to include federal law enforcement. How dare we ignore them on this day? And we cannot ignore January 6th. We cannot ignore the Capitol Police, who will always have the scars, along with those who came to help, of that horrific day. Why? Because we've never seen in our modern day eyes an attack on the United States Capitol that was not in war. And so I stand here today to say,
time has
yes,
expired.
I support.
Yield the gentlelady an additional minute.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank the distinguished gentleman. Yes, I support the local law enforcement. And never have my lips ever said the word that would take dollars away from those personnel, their salaries, and all that they need to do. I don't know why in a resolution that speaks about honor, that we have to mix not even apples and oranges, but apples and stench. There's no reason to attack anyone in this. Put a resolution about how much you hate the folk on the other side of the aisle. We'll debate that. I don't hate them. But we tried to do in committee is to say, let us make this a resolution, federal and state and local folk. And let us not talk about folk who are dismantling anything. Because I don't know Democrats who stood outside of a DA's office to try and dismantle them. They have an independent decision right to make. And they're elected by the people. And if they're not at the level that the people want, they are gone. So I ask my colleagues,
the gentlewoman's
I'd like
time
to
has
amend
expired.
this on the floor. Let this
The
be an
gentlewoman's
amendment that
time
we
has
all
expired.
can vote for. This is, my last
The
word.
gentlewoman's time has expired.
I support local and federal law enforcement.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 30 seconds.
I support federal and state and local law enforcement. I support those that are in my district right now. And I would offer to say, aren't we examples for young people? Don't we want our children to raise up and support law enforcement and see all of us standing together and not dividing? And don't we want good policing, good police relationships? None of that is a divide. It is a unity, and it represents the Constitution of the United States of America. And I will tell you that the officers that I've engaged with believe in it. I ask my colleagues to try and do something better than this legislation. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, it's a little more, it is highly disingenuous for my colleagues to suggest, because this resolution doesn't thank all sorts of other groups, that we can't thank local law enforcement. This resolution doesn't thank governors. It doesn't thank lieutenant governors. It doesn't thank secretaries of state. It doesn't thank state attorney generals. It doesn't thank the generals and admirals at the Pentagon. It doesn't thank the folks who are working so hard in the cafeteria to provide us with food today. It doesn't thank a lot of people, but it does thank local law enforcement. And for that, we should unite. For that, we should come together. For that, we should overcome these ridiculous arguments and pat someone on the back. And then let's work. Let's work towards another resolution. Let's make sure we thank those FBI agents who are working in the field, not the ones who planned to dismantle our political system, but the ones who are working in the field to protect us. Let's thank those ATF agents who are arresting convicted felons who are in possession of a firearm. Let's thank them. Let's thank federal law enforcement. Let's thank the Capitol Police for their great work on January 6th. But don't vote against this resolution thanking local police officers just because it's not broad enough and doesn't include every single category you can think of. And I reserve.
The gentleman from Colorado reserves. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, again, if the gentleman wanted to support our federal police, the ATF, the FBI, the Capitol Police, he had the opportunity in committee, and the Republicans refused to let us consider that. And we have all these statements from people like the chairman of the committee saying defund the FBI, defund the ATF. So this is being a little, shall we say, I don't want to use the word hypocritical, but I can't think of a different word. We should oppose this resolution because it is blatantly one-sided. It blames leftist agitators improperly, and it does not deal with federal law enforcement agencies. And with that, I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I reserve also and prepared to close.
The gentleman is recognized from New York.
Mr. Speaker, Police Week ought to be a unifying event, a time when we can all come together in a bipartisan fashion to recognize and support the men and women of law enforcement who risk their lives to keep us and our communities safe. But instead of offering serious legislation, Republicans have brought forward misleading and incendiary political talking points that will neither protect law enforcement nor enhance public safety. I urge all members to oppose this resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
I thank the Speaker, and I appreciate the words of my colleague from New York, but I want to reiterate what this resolution is about and what it says. Congress recognizes and appreciates the dedication and devotion demonstrated by the men and women of local law enforcement who keep our communities safe, and condemns calls to defund, disband, dismantle, or abolish the police. It's absolutely correct that this resolution doesn't include everybody and everything. And there will be time in this Congress where we can work together to do that. But to not pass this resolution, to not vote for this resolution during Police Week is a slap in the face to local law enforcement. Mr. Speaker, I invite all the people who are watching today and all Americans to tune in to the Weaponization Committee as they listen to witnesses whistleblowers from federal agencies talking about the abuses in those federal agencies. It would be inappropriate until we reach conclusions, until we pass legislation protecting Americans and protecting our political process, for us to take that extra step with federal law enforcement. I have said over and over, I absolutely respect the men and women who are on the streets in federal law enforcement protecting us. It is the leadership that we have issues with at times. That's not in this resolution. This resolution is a unifying resolution, and I hope my friends on the other side of the aisle can join us in thanking local law enforcement. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. All time for debate has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part C of House Report number 118-59, offered by Mr. D'Esposito of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 398, the gentleman from New York, Mr. D'Esposito, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today, obviously, in support of this amendment. During Police Week, across this nation, we've taken an opportunity to remember and to reflect upon men and women who have paid and made the ultimate sacrifice while protecting their community. And throughout this week, I shared it with colleagues, not only colleagues from the House of Representatives, but colleagues from law enforcement agencies throughout this nation. And we shared time at the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And one of the most striking parts of that beautiful memorial is an inscription under a lion that says, "It is not how these individuals died that made them heroes, it's how they lived." So this amendment recognizes the bravery and the courage of those men and women who are living in law enforcement. And as a retired NYPD detective, I understand the bravery and courage it takes to be a law enforcement officer. I've seen the dangers firsthand and know the struggles officers must overcome every day. They suit up, put their bulletproof vest on, pin their shield to their chest, and head out to stand the line between good and evil. It is critical for local law enforcement officers to have rights and protections as they work to keep our communities safe, such as the right to self-defense against physical threats, the right to be protected from physical harassment targeting law enforcement, the right to equipment necessary for personal protection, and legal recourse if a civilian attempts to assault them. My amendment works to ensure law enforcement officials have fair administration of justice during investigations and encourages states to adopt their own Bill of Rights to support the brave men and women of law enforcement. As members of our law enforcement community put their lives on the line to protect our communities each and every day, I encourage all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to show them unwavering support and vote yes on my amendment. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose?
Mr.
Does the
Speaker,
gentleman from New York rise?
I claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I oppose the D'Esposito amendment as its central focus is advocacy for the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, a controversial measure pushed by police unions and adopted by many states in response to demands for greater accountability and transparency following many high-profile incidents of police abuse and misconduct. While seemingly benign, the impact of a Bill of Rights for law enforcement officers can be profound. For decades, this type of legislation has been one of the greatest obstacles to police accountability, hindering investigations and shielding misconduct from public scrutiny, a likely explanation for why less than half of all states have adopted one. In Maryland, the first state to adopt and the first state to repeal an officer's Bill of Rights, the statute was also often cited as the reason for Baltimore's long history of police misconduct. In many instances, the statutes offer protections and procedural privileges to law enforcement officers facing accusations of wrongdoing or disciplinary action far beyond those accorded to other government employees or to the average citizen, the average civilian accused of criminal behavior. For instance, some states provide officers involved in an incident a cooling-off period of 24 hours or so before they must cooperate with internal investigators. During this cooling-off period, an officer and his or her attorney may have access to evidence collected during the investigation before the officer is interviewed. And through these statutes, officers are shielded from the very interview tactics that they use on civilians, such as lengthy interrogations or the use of aggressive or threatening questioning or promises or rewards to induce cooperation, both of which this amendment suggests should be avoided to ensure the fair administration of justice when investigating officer misconduct, and only officer misconduct. These laws can allow officers accused of wrongdoing to remain on duty for prolonged periods of time while investigations are conducted, as well as limit the types of disciplinary actions that can be taken against officers accused of wrongdoing. They also often limit the authority of civilian review boards and make it difficult for the public to access information about officers' misconduct in disciplinary proceedings, and ultimately for civilians to hold officers accountable for their actions. These concerns have led to calls across the country to repeal or reform existing law enforcement officers' bills of rights to ensure more transparency, accountability, and fairness in the disciplinary process. When mayors and police chiefs have attempted to reform their troubled police departments, it has been their state's officers' bills of rights that have stood in the way. While this amendment might be well-intentioned, it encourages states to adopt a Bill of Rights for local law enforcement personnel without offering any guidance so that we might not further perpetuate the already problematic nature of these measures, which I have just outlined. Lastly, I note that just as the text of H-Con Res. 40 celebrates local law enforcement while ignoring thousands of federal, state, and tribal law enforcement officers, so too does this amendment. It is for these reasons that I must oppose this amendment. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Well, thank you. Mr. Nadler, the correct pronunciation of my last name is D'Esposito. Thank you. So the reason why this amendment is on the floor is because members of the party on the opposite side of the aisle have made it a popular decision to target law enforcement, to make their jobs more difficult, to legitimately take the handcuffs that are on their gun belt and use them on the cops so they can't do their job. And that is why this amendment is important. It's important to honor law enforcement. It's important to recognize law enforcement. And this is very simple. It's a Bill of Rights. It's giving them the ability to do the job that they took an oath to do. They rose their right hand. They swore on a Bible to protect, to serve, to go out each and every day and stand that line that I mentioned between good and evil. The fact that any member of this House of Representatives who claims to support law enforcement, who likes to put those tweets of thoughts and prayers, God forbid, when a member of law enforcement loses their life. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thoughts and prayers when an officer gets killed is not enough. What we need to do is supply them with a Bill of Rights. What we need to do is to implore states to do the same. So that is why I'm asking all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the right thing. Today is about supporting law enforcement.
Gentleman, time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, if I mispronounced Mr. D'Esposito's name, I apologize. I thought I said it correctly. Secondly, I outlined in my remarks the problems with existing state bills of rights for police officers. Some states have repealed them. They have gotten in the way of investigations. They have gotten in the way of investigations of police brutality and misconduct, and generally have aggravated all the reasons, all the problems that I spoke about in my opposition to the main bill. And for that reason, I reiterate my opposition to this amendment and urge all my colleagues to vote against it, and I yield back the balance.
Time has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the previous question is ordered on the concurrent resolution, on the preamble, and on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. D'Esposito. The question is on the amendment by the gentleman from New York, Mr. D'Esposito. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what reasons does the gentleman from New York?
I ask for the recorded vote.
Okay. Does the gentleman request the ayes and nays?
Yes, I request the ayes and nays.
It's fine.
Yes, anyway.
The ayes and nays are requested. Those in favoring a vote by the ayes and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the ayes and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the Chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption of the concurrent resolution. This is a 15-minute vote. I repeat, 15-minute vote.
Yeas are 268. The nays are 156. The amendment is adopted. The question is on the adoption of the concurrent resolution as amendment. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The concurrent resolution is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to read is laid on the table.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Request of Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas
Mr.
request
Speaker.
recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
I can't hear you.
Mr. Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. All votes are in. The yeas are 301. The nays are 119. Votes present, 3. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is on the table and it is passed. The concurrent resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Gentleman from Georgia. Sir.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at noon on Monday next for morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business.
Without objection. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby remove myself as a co-sponsor from H.R. 1844 through H.R. 2364.
Your request is granted, good sir. This is the gentleman from Tennessee. Seek recognition.
To address the House floor for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, was designed by liberals to harass American businesses and has been compromising American consumers' access to financial services. The CFPB is unconstitutional, duplicative, and full of bad ideas. For example, it's currently pursuing a rule that would effectively ban banks from offering overdraft protection, a benefit utilized by millions of Americans. The CFPB is part of a federal bureaucracy that Republicans have pledged to do away with. Today, I'm introducing the mandating the abolition of a threat to consumer happiness, the Match Act, which will impose a permanent hiring freeze at the CFPB and prohibit it from establishing any new positions, transferring employees, and halt any new appointments. The CFPB is nothing more than Joe Biden's DEI Enforcement Bureau. It's an agency that needs to be burnt to the ground, and I am providing the match. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to praise the work of President Biden to make our communities safer. First, the American Rescue Plan provided $350 billion for states and cities to help Americans. Funding from this plan has been used to hire more police and first responders. Second, President Biden's work led to the bipartisan efforts to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. His work expanded background checks for gun purchases, funded crisis intervention, and protected victims from domestic violence. In addition, President Biden has cracked down on illegal gun sales and the production of ghost guns to keep them off of our streets. He continues to provide necessary funding for police officers and other law enforcement officials. And he has made unprecedented investments in community-based crime prevention initiatives. As a congressman committed to reducing gun violence, I applaud President Biden's successful efforts to make our country safer. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose is the gentleman from Georgia and my friend seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Mr. Fred Alexander of Glenn County, Georgia. Born in 1940 in Vidalia, Georgia, Fred was a standout athlete in football, basketball, baseball, and track. After graduating from Lyons High School, he went on to attend Georgia Teachers College, then Austin Peay State University in Tennessee on a football scholarship. Along with his brother Bill, Fred owned the Island Grove Motel before joining the local banking industry, an industry he worked in for 35 years. Outside of his professional life, Fred was a longtime member of the St. Simon's United Methodist Church, a past president of the Brunswick Exchange Club, and a member of the Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors. Being an avid golfer, he also served on the board of directors of the Brunswick Country Club. He enjoyed spending his time off the golf course playing gin rummy and dancing with his beloved wife, Janie. One of the newest hobbies was waving good morning to the Glenn Middle School students as they passed by his Lanier Boulevard home. Fred is survived by his wife, 5 children, and a whole host of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. My sincere condolences go out to the Alexander family during this most difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, May is Jewish American Heritage Month, a time to acknowledge the inspiring history of American Jews and to celebrate their contributions to every facet of American life, from science and medicine to education and technology to music, theater, philanthropy, civil rights, and the pursuit of justice. American Jews have worked hard to build our great country, and yet we are facing a frightening rise in anti-Semitism. The 2021 FBI hate crimes report showed a 20% increase in anti-Semitic hate crimes. Jews are the most targeted minority group in America, despite being only 2% of the population. History has taught us that what starts with anti-Semitism never stops there. Hatred spreads to other minorities and threatens the foundations of democracy. As the co-chair of the House Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism, I'm working with members on both sides of the aisle and the Biden administration to confront anti-Semitism. I will continue this fight to honor the Jewish Americans who have contributed so much to American life.
Thank you. For purposes, the gentleman from the U.S. territory of Guam seek recognition. Without objection, the gentleman from Guam is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, with Armed Forces Day approaching on Saturday, I rise to honor our military, their families, and our veterans who defend American security, American prosperity, and American values. On the ground, in the air, and at sea, millions of Americans bravely protect and defend our country around the world. Back home in my district, the island of Guam, we have the highest per capita statistics of enlisted members in the nation and is home for over 15,000 military veterans. Our island heavily relies on the military personnel for security, as we are the closest U.S. soil to China. And as tensions rise from the Chinese Communist Party in the Indo-Pacific region, we are grateful for our military, for their readiness, and for the sacrifice they made to protect my home, the island of Guam. Thank you to our service members, and happy Armed Forces Day. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Speaker, I should ask consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman and my friend from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak on National Infrastructure Week. For too long, we've been living off the investments our parents and grandparents made a generation or two ago. Thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we passed in the last Congress and President Biden signed into law, we now have moved from Infrastructure Week to Infrastructure Decade. The law in California has created over 48,000 jobs in this short time with an investment of $42 billion. In my district, we're seeing progress. In some of the examples here, reinvestment in San Luis Reservoir Dam, another 130,000 acre-feet of additional water storage, upgrading and expanding miles of highway improvements, funding clean school buses for communities like in Cutler and Orosi, and we'll be breaking ground for the expansion of the Fresno Yosemite International Airport to provide greater service. These are just some examples, and we are just getting started in my district. 3 years of funding remaining, and now we have an opportunity to move from Infrastructure Decade throughout America. It's about time. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, my friend, the gentlewoman from Michigan, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand here today in strong opposition to the Chinese Communist Party's takeover of a town in my home state of Michigan. The CCP is using one of their state-controlled companies to implant thousands of Chinese workers and billions worth of Chinese technology just outside of Big Rapids. The company is called Goshen, and their technology is EV batteries. Now, Goshen likes to say that this is a good thing for Michigan and maybe even a good thing for America. Why? Because they claim it brings jobs and money to our economy. But let's not forget the over $500 million worth of taxpayer dollars that will be used to subsidize and build this facility. And that's quite frankly why I call BS. Goshen is bought and paid for by the CCP, and let's be clear, the CCP is not our friend. So I'm not standing idly by and going to let this happen. I'm going to stand with the people of the great state of Michigan and call this out and continue to bring attention to this and do something about this. And that's why I'm here today, to call out the CCP for this blatant attempt to overtake our state. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the great state and Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman from the Commonwealth of Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Republicans are presenting us with a false choice: default on our debt and cause a recession, or pass their Default on America Act and slash environmental funding and clean energy investments made through the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA is the most significant legislation in U.S. history to tackle the climate crisis and strengthen American energy security. And Virginians in my district have already seen tangible benefits from the bill through environmental restoration funding for our tribal communities, climate-resilient infrastructure upgrades, and clean school buses for our children. And it will continue to deliver for our Commonwealth. There are already more than 92,000 Virginians employed in clean energy jobs, and the IRA will create even more opportunity, bringing $11.6 billion in funding to our Commonwealth for large-scale clean power generation and storage by 2030. The IRA represents a new chapter for my constituents who are excited to purchase energy-efficient appliances, make repairs for their homes, and save money on their utility bills. However, the draconian Default on America Act would jeopardize many of these provisions. We must reject these extreme cuts and cleanly raise the debt ceiling. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate National Police Week, we honor and thank the brave men and women of law enforcement. Just this week, we passed the Support Police Act, and I proudly supported it. Public safety is the most important factor to a high quality of life and perhaps the #1 function of government. But sadly, we've seen a rise in anti-law enforcement rhetoric and violence. Already this year, 135 officers have been shot in the line of duty, more than 50% increase from this time in 2020. This should be agonizing to all Americans. As well, we must, as elected officials, always show respect for the work and authority of the police. If we don't, portions of the public will not, and weakening the thin blue line is dangerous to police officers and to society as a whole. So to all those who put on the uniform every day, we say thank you to America's finest. And as your representative in Congress and the son of a former police detective, know that I will always back the blue. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address, asking unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from the state of California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to discuss a vision for our nation that values the well-being of the communities we serve. As a new member of Congress, I have plans for what I want to accomplish for the people of California's 37th District, which is to lead, to focus on land, economic justice, art, and democracy. Land means finding ways to mitigate the climate crisis to put us on a sustainable path for the future. Focusing on economic justice means ensuring that marginalized communities can access economic opportunities. The A refers to art and education. I will always be an advocate for the future of the arts and the unique stories artists tell. Lastly, I am laser focused on safeguarding our democracy. The past couple of years have taught us it is fragile, vital, and worth fighting for. But my priorities are not the GOP's priorities. So far, the GOP has put forward bills attacking our education system, parents, and immigrants, as well as plans that would be catastrophic for our environment and economy. But I am committed to my plan for Angelenos and to leading us through this moment, fiercely hoping we can push towards progress together. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the Commonwealth of Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the House floor for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from the Commonwealth of Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the past 2 years, our Hampton Roads and Navy communities have been devastated by multiple sailor suicides, in particular aboard the USS George Washington and at Marmac. As a former Navy helicopter pilot and a primary care nurse practitioner, it infuriates me that the number of sailors who die by suicide continues to rise. It's clear for anyone to see we have to better serve those who serve our great Navy and our country. That's why this week I introduced the Sailor Standard of Care Act. This important bipartisan legislation would increase mental health resources and require mental health screenings for sailors assigned to limited duty, address challenges service members and their families face accessing mental health care through TRICARE, and implement a system to track quality of life programs and their success rates. It is imperative that we address the mental health challenges facing today's active duty service members and veterans, and that we do it today. This is exactly why I came to Congress. We speak so much about providing our military men and women with the necessary equipment, technology, training, etc., to be ready to fight tonight, and rightfully so. However, all those resources in the world are meaningless without the capable men and women behind it. Right now, the harsh reality is that suicides among active duty service members are at an all-time high. Tragically, they increased by more than 40% between 2015 and 2020. We owe it to our service members to do everything in our power to ensure they have the support and mental health care they need. They put their own well-being on the line to serve our nation, and our nation must put their well-being first. We must prioritize our servicemen and women and their families, and focusing on quality of life we provide them while they serve. As a veteran, granddaughter of a veteran, spouse of a veteran, and mother of future veterans, I'm honored to fight every day for the quality of life they deserve. Thank you very much.
For what purpose does a gentlewoman from the great state of Michigan seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House floor for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from the great state of Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
Today, I'm on the House floor to talk about a condition that impacts the lives of so many Americans: tuberous sclerosis complex, or TSC. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Cardona family who shared their child's story with me, and thousands of other families across America loving a child with TSC. TSC is a rare genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow on vital organs, prompting seizures and developmental issues, and often delaying children's progress in school. Despite its profound impact on American families, TSC often goes unrecognized. Research into diseases like TSC benefits countless individuals and families battling different conditions. It leads to scientific breakthroughs and discoveries to help cure a wide range of diseases, making better care and quality of life a reality for so many. Today, I invite my colleagues to rally behind rare disease research for conditions like TSC. Thank you so much, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
For what purposes the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from the great state of North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, we must act on the border security crisis. However, with the divided Congress, we can only act on a bipartisan basis to be successful. Any immigration reform needs to reflect our shared American values and the needs of our modern economy. We must set aside the partisan infighting and unite for the greater good and strength of our country. On border security, I said it was a priority to travel to the southern border to see the challenges for myself. And that's why I'm heading to the Rio Grande Valley along the Texas-Mexico border today to do just that. Mr. Speaker, thank you, and I yield back.
For what purposes the gentlewoman from the great state of North Carolina seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I seek to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from the great state of North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to an extreme abortion ban that North Carolina Republicans passed through the General Assembly after overriding Governor Cooper's veto this week. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade nearly a year ago, North Carolina has become a safe haven for women seeking reproductive care across the South. As states like Georgia and Florida enacted dangerous 6-week bans, North Carolina stood as a bastion for women's reproductive freedom. Mr. Speaker, Republicans in my state are now turning the clock back 50 years by enacting a dangerous abortion ban and restrictions on providing health care. The truth is, women will suffer and doctors will be penalized under this dangerous law. We will not stay silent in the face of attacks on our rights and our health care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
What purposes the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from the great state of California is recognized for 1 minute.
I rise today during National Police Week to memorialize our officers who lost their lives in the line of duty and call for action. In my district in Riverside County, we have lost 6 Sheriff Department deputies in the line of duty since 2020. This is in addition to the losses our local police departments have suffered over the years, including Palm Springs Police Department officers Leslie Zarebny and Gil Vega, who we lost on October 8, 2016. It is because of Officers Zarebny and Vega and Deputies Brett Harris, Darnell Calhoun, and Isaiah Cordero that I have authored legislation to support families of fallen officers, and why I have fought to improve the Public Safety Officers Benefits Program so that their families can get the support they need. So this National Police Week and all year round, I'm standing up for our law enforcement officers and their families. I'm pushing for support for those grieving the loss of their brothers and sisters in uniform, and I'm calling for action on behalf of those who protect and serve our communities every day. I yield back.
For what purposes the gentlewoman from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania seek recognition?
The great Commonwealth. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. This week, Police Week, is a special time to recognize the courage and sacrifice of police officers in my district and across the country. Police chiefs have shared their challenges with me, from difficulties with recruitment and retention to the high costs of modernizing their equipment and technology. That's why I am co-sponsoring the Invest to Protect Act that funds small police departments, like many in Pennsylvania 7, to help with retention and training. Small departments like this one in Weatherly, Carbon County, Pennsylvania. It's why I voted to institute stricter consequences for assault of law enforcement officers and voted to memorialize fallen officers killed in the line of duty. It's why I am opposing the extreme GOP budget proposal to cut by 23% the number of local law enforcement agencies receiving federal funding. And that's why I'm proposing that we increase funding for public safety programs. Police officers put their lives on the line to keep us safe every single day. They deserve our thanks and our support, but they also deserve the federal resources that they need to modernize and retain their officers. I will keep working to ensure that they have those resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from the great state and sunny state of Florida seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from the great state of Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Today I rise to wish the entire Haitian American community a happy Haitian Flag Day. The Haitian flag is a global symbol of resilience and freedom and representing the spirit of Haiti, the world's first Black republic. Haiti's flag represents its indomitable spirit of the Haitian people, from the triumphant fight for independence to the resilient efforts to recover in the wake of a catastrophic earthquake. Haiti has inspired us all. The flag embodies the richness of Haiti's history and culture and unites over 1.3 million Haitian Americans across the United States. Haiti's journey has certainly not been without challenges. Today, Haiti finds itself in turbulent times, battling instability, violence, and threats to its democracy. It's so important that our communities remain represented and united so we can address these difficult times as good neighbors. Hope is a powerful force. We will never stop hoping, but most importantly, we will never stop fighting for a better tomorrow. La Union fait les forces. Have a wonderful Haitian Flag Day. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman of the great state of Minnesota seek recognition?
I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from the great state of Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My friends, this National Police Week, instead of helping communities recruit and train the next generation of principled police officers, we voted to let officers buy their department's retired handguns. And we voted on a non-binding resolution opposing defund the police. So many of us here are willing and ready to work together to address the problems that I hear about when I meet with our police chiefs and police officers. In fact, my bipartisan Pathways to Policing Act has been endorsed by law enforcement and is still awaiting action on this floor. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to let's get to work and legitimately invest in law enforcement. Let's stop creating campaign slogans and start working on congressional solutions like my Pathways to Policing Act to ensure safety, security, and justice for all. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from the great state of New Mexico is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of our local law enforcement officers in New Mexico and across the country. These heroes in uniform keep our community safe. That's why I voted in support of the Police Act, because assaulting an officer is never acceptable, never. However, I have serious concerns about how this bill was written and how it can be interpreted. The vague language creates the risk of wrongfully criminalizing law-abiding people who are legally in this country. But let me be clear, assault is never acceptable, especially when it comes to our officers of the peace and to our first responders. Our law enforcement put their lives on the line every single day to ensure our communities are safe, and for that and so much more, they deserve our respect. To my constituents, I want you to know that I'm committed to finding solutions to address our public safety issues with my partners across the aisle and to support local law enforcement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from the great state of Arkansas, Mr. Hill, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader. Mr. Hill.
Well, I thank the Speaker, and I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my friend, Ms. Kiggins from Virginia, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in honor of National Police Week. I'm proud to stand with Virginia's police officers, not just during National Police Week, but each and every day. Our brave men and women in blue selflessly confront danger to protect us and our families, and I firmly believe it is only right to recognize all they do to keep our communities safe. Unfortunately, as Americans face a rise in violent crime across the nation, law enforcement officers have faced significant challenges and grave threats that have jeopardized the safety of those sworn to protect our communities. These challenges range from increased violence against officers, efforts to defund police departments, lagging technology, recruitment and retention issues, and rising mental health concerns. Last year, 246 law enforcement officers were tragically killed in the line of duty. This year, there have already been 41 officers killed in the line of duty serving their communities. We must do more to support our brave men and women of our nation's law enforcement who serve our communities with courage, dedication, and strength. This week, I was proud to vote for several bills that showed them that we have their backs just like they have ours. Whether it's through legislation or simple actions, we must prioritize appreciation of the men and women in blue who put themselves in harm's way to protect their communities. The people of Virginia's 2nd District do an excellent job of showing our support for our men and women in law enforcement. This week, members of my team attended the annual Police Week ceremony at Virginia Beach's Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. The ceremony and the memorial serve as a solemn reminder of what our police officers put on the line every day that they wake up and go to work to protect our community. Mr. Speaker, please join me and the people of Virginia's 2nd District in recognizing the brave men and women of our law enforcement community for putting their lives on the line to keep us safe. Thank you, and I yield back.
We thank the gentlewoman from Virginia for her support of police and for her service representing the people of her state. Mr. Speaker, the United States is close to defaulting on its debt. That would be the first time in our nation's history. The situation we face today was fully avoidable. The Biden administration's reckless spending and economic illiteracy over the past 2 years has propelled our debt crisis and driven inflation to a 40-year high. The American people have directly felt the impact of this administration's negligence towards an effective and practical economic policy. It's well past time for our government to rein in reckless spending and work together towards returning to a balanced budget, a concept that both parties used to agree to strongly for decades. Through the years, policy negotiations were a key part of many debt ceiling agreements. Throughout our nation's history, we've negotiated spending deals and reforms many times by using the debt ceiling vote as a constructive catalyst to action. Yet for over 100 days, despite promises to the contrary, President Biden has refused to take this opportunity and willingly and effectively negotiate with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Over the past 3 months, while the President has been unresponsive, Speaker McCarthy has been hard at work alongside House Republicans and with support from our Republican colleagues in the Senate to ensure that we address this debt crisis in a timely, responsible manner. We have done our part here in the House by passing the Limit, Save, and Grow Act, which responsibly raises the debt ceiling while addresses the other key issues our nation faces today. Finally, in recent hours, with less than 2 weeks to go, President Biden has surfaced and engaged in a conversation with Speaker McCarthy. This is good news. President Biden, join House Republicans in a sensible and responsible agreement this week and avoid driving our nation even further into economic chaos. Now, Mr. Speaker, recently Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was invited back into the Arab League after 12 years of being in exile. I can't tell you how incredibly frustrating and disappointing this is to many, particularly the innocent people of Syria who have endured more than a decade of war, murder, and torture. Assad's readmittance to the Arab League sends the wrong signal. It sends the signal to the rest of the world that his atrocious war crimes against his own citizens over the past 12 years are acceptable. A recent Reuters article had the headline, "Arabs bring Syria's Assad back into the fold, but want action on the drug trade." Well, that's rich, because the only reason that there is an epidemic in the drug trade in the Gulf and the region is because of Assad. Assad turned to Russia and Iran to maintain his death machine, and now the Captagon drug trade, led by his cousins, led by his military, providing an independent source of funding for his regime, while he poisons his neighbors and takes their money and fuels terrorism in the region. And yet, he's invited back to the Arab League meeting. It's preposterous. My bill that passed last year's National Defense Authorization Act was called the Captagon Act and requires the U.S. government to develop a multilateral and all-of-government approach to disrupting and dismantling the production of the Captagon drug right in the heart of Syria. Recently, the Treasury Department, along with our ally, the United Kingdom, took steps to sanction key actors in Assad's inner circle who are producing and trafficking Captagon. This is a good step, but it's months late, Mr. Speaker. It's in the right direction of disrupting and dismantling the trafficking networks associated with this illicit drug. But it's just a start, and it comes years after we know the deadly impact of Captagon on the region, on families, but also the fueling of terror by Assad through the billions of dollars transferred from that illicit trafficking. So it's critical that governments across the globe continue to show their support for the Syrian people by denouncing those who seek to normalize relations with this repulsive regime. Granting Assad admittance to the Arab League once again sends the opposite message. It rewards barbaric behavior. The United States government has an obligation to sanction Assad in our efforts to dismantle the Captagon drug trade and hold Assad accountable for his war crimes. And that's why I'm pleased this week to co-sponsor the Middle East Subcommittee Chairman Joe Wilson's new bill, H.R. 3202, the Assad Regime Anti-Normalization Act. This bill was passed this week unanimously in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congress will act where this administration has continuously failed to consistently do so. I look forward to supporting this bill on the House floor and seeing it signed into law. Mr. Speaker, I rise to commemorate the 70th anniversary of our alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea. To commend this momentous occasion, Speaker McCarthy, Leader McConnell invited Republic of Korea President Yoon to visit the House chamber and address Congress in a joint meeting. From the ashes of the Korean conflict to one of now the world's largest and most successful economy, Republic of Korea is a testament to America's dedication to support market economics and democracy. The successful alliance between the U.S. and the Republic of Korea has maintained peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region for those past 7 decades. Now more than ever, it's critical that the U.S. continue to support our ally in their efforts to protect their vibrant democracy and prosperous economy from the daily threats from North Korea and the growing aggression of the Chinese Communist Party. I thank President Yoon for his leadership, for the tenacity of the Korean people to come from an authoritarian republic to truly a democratic one, and for building one of the top 10 largest economies in the world. That's an amazing transformation over those 7 decades. Together, we'll continue to promote freedom and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to commend the efforts of Central Arkansas during the recovery period after our devastating tornado that hit our district last month. Our neighbors immediately began to work hand in hand, neighbor to neighbor, to rebuild our community. Many volunteered and worked tirelessly to set up emergency shelters in our local schools and churches to ensure those impacted by this severe storm had safe housing in the wake of the tornado. The response of our leaders at the state, county, and city level was invaluable and to be commended. The incredible efforts and active emergency response from Governor Sarah Sanders, Pulaski County Judge Barry Hyde, Little Rock Mayor Frank Scott, Mayor Terry Hartwick of North Little Rock, Mayor Jeff Elmore in Jacksonville, and Mayor Mary Jo High Townsell of Sherwood, and many, many others, all saved lives and accelerated the recovery process. Not only did we witness their outstanding response and an outpouring of local volunteers, but we saw the swift action of our first responders and our essential businesses. Entergy Arkansas began repairs to the local power grid as soon as the storms passed, and many of our linemen and women worked countless hours to restore power, even when themselves were affected. One lineman I met with was in his bed at that time of the tornado, and the roof torn off his apartment, and after a day off from that tragedy, was out there working 16 hours a day to connect the power to his neighbors. Countless time put in, neighbor for neighbor. Entergy Arkansas's corporate office also donated $50,000 to the American Red Cross to be used toward tornado recovery efforts, with an additional pledge of up to $50,000 matching employee donations. The Arkansas Food Bank did an incredible job of delivering food, water, and other necessary items throughout our communities to ensure those affected by the storms were supported by necessary goods. Additionally, our local restaurants, our local businesses, all donated hundreds of meals and supplies to those in need. I thank our community for demonstrating generosity and thoughtfulness during a time of great need. They simply demonstrate that core value that we all take pride in as Arkansans and Americans. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to highlight the exceptional career of Frank Thomas, who retired in March from Stephens, Inc., a financial services firm headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas. Frank graduated from the University of Arkansas in 1976 and was the first news director at KUAF, the local Razorback radio station. He quickly rose from local radio to national politics, working for former U.S. Senator David Pryor as his chief of staff. After Frank's time in public service, he felt drawn home to Arkansas and has worked for Stephens for the past 27 years. Stephens has long believed that Arkansas is truly the land of opportunity, and Stephens has invested in and benefited from its long association with our state. In fact, Stephens helped a little-known company called Walmart launch their initial public offering and become the largest retailer in the world. I thank Frank for his service and his lifelong commitment to Arkansas and the 2nd Congressional District, our nation, and I wish Frank, his wife, and his family many, many happy years ahead. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to congratulate my dear friend of some 5 decades, Kathy Owen, on her induction into the Arkansas Women's Hall of Fame. Kathy's a trailblazer and a role model for women in banking in Arkansas, having served the banking community for over 50 years. She's been with Eagle Bank for over 40 of those years in various roles, most recently as chairwoman since 2012. During her time at Eagle Bank, she's worked tirelessly to build the bank into a large, respected community bank. Over the years, she and her team have been dedicated to customer service and developing outstanding products and services. Outside of her achievements in the banking industry, she remains an active leader in our community. She's a generous volunteer and supporter of Baptist Hospital Foundation, 50 for the Future, and the North Little Rock Chamber of Commerce, among many other endeavors. I've had the privilege of working with Kathy in the industry for decades during my time in banking, and I'm proud to call Kathy a friend. I thank her for her many years of outstanding service in the community and congratulate her on this well-deserved induction into the Arkansas Women's Hall of Fame. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate my friend and a true example of a leader, Command Sergeant Major Stephen Veazey, and I wish the Command Sergeant a happy and healthy retirement. Command Sergeant Major Veazey, an Arkansas native, have been serving on the Arkansas Army National Guard since 1979 and is retired after 44 years of service. The positive impact he has made in the Guard is undeniable, and he has set the standard for what it means to be a non-commissioned officer. Over the years, the Command Sergeant Major deployed to Bosnia, Iraq. His awards and decorations include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Army Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters. Stephen exemplifies leadership not only as the Command Sergeant Major, but as a leader in our community, serving as a member of the East Union Missionary Baptist Church, the American Legion, and as past president of the Sheridan Rotary Club. His wife, Leanna, has been his steadfast partner for the past 43 years and the cornerstone of support. Together, they've raised 2 children, Tasha and Stephen. Over the past 9 years, I'm so grateful for his friendship and leadership. I treasure our time together since my service in Congress. From paying tribute to a young soldier or an airman for a job well done, or saluting those who've paid that ultimate sacrifice. My best wishes, Stephen, for your well-deserved retirement. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the reopening of our magnificent Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts. The museum, located in downtown Little Rock, reopened on April 22nd after almost 4 years since closing for renovation and expansion. After years of planning, the museum has been reimagined into a beautiful work of art itself. The architecture firm Studio Gang led the design, which preserves historic elements of the building, but includes other critical, interesting, and tasteful elements, making it into one of the most influential museums in the country. The museum has much to offer, from the visual and performing arts to full art educational experiences. The goal is to create a cultural space where our community can engage with a diverse portfolio of artistic perspectives and come together to see the beautiful temporary exhibitions and participate in the wonderful array of educational courses. I thank all involved for their efforts in making this renovation possible and congratulate the Arkansas Museum of Fine Arts for this new chapter in their history in our state. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate my friend Jim Keat on being named Arkansan of the Year. Throughout his life, Jim has been an outstanding and active member of our state civic affairs, and particularly in Central Arkansas. Jim served both in the Arkansas House of Representatives and in the Arkansas State Senate in the 1990s. In addition to his years of public service, he's one of our state's most successful entrepreneurs. He's president of the Keat Management Company and chairman of JTJ Restaurants, where he has operated at 155 restaurants over the past 5 decades. Beyond his success in business and politics, he has served on the board of directors for 20 years at Easter Seals, Arkansas. Easter Seals is an organization that seeks to empower those with disabilities to have fulfilling lives and become active members of their communities. As the founder of the Arkansan of the Year Award, while with Easter Seals, Arkansas, this honor comes full circle now for Jim. His tremendous work ethic and dedication to improving the lives of Arkansans deserves this recognition. I'm proud to call Jim a friend and congratulate him on this exceptional honor. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Staff Sergeant Benjamin Cotton and Staff Sergeant Alan Smith of the Arkansas Army National Guard for winning this year's International Sniper Competition. This competition allows soldiers to display their abilities in a rigorous environment designed to put their extensive training to test against 35 international teams. The team included New Mexico Army National Guard member Eric Vargas, and they completed 3 days straight testing of their shooting skills, physical endurance, and problem solving as they took on a variety of scenarios with multiple weapon systems. Staff Sergeant Smith enlisted in 2003 and Staff Sergeant Cotton in 2006. Both have deployed to Iraq, and they've served as sniper team leaders and marksmanship instructors with Army National Guard. In addition to serving their country, they serve our communities as firefighters. Their leadership abilities and mental fortitude earned them this competition, and I'm honored to add these men to my recognition for this outstanding accomplishment across 35 very competitive international teams. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate my friend Mac McClarty for receiving the Legacy of Leadership Award at the 35th Annual Arkansas Business of the Year ceremony. Mr. McClarty is chairman of the McClarty Companies and was White House Chief of Staff under President Bill Clinton. Mac also served on the National Petroleum Council and the Council on Environmental Quality at the request of President George H.W. Bush. While chief to the President Clinton, he advised on a wide range of international and domestic issues, such as the 1993 Deficit Reduction Package, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and multiple trips as it relates to attending the G7 economic summits. Today, Mac is a respected senior advisor in both the public and private sectors and a prominent public speaker who shares his thoughts and experiences in the realm of U.S. trade and foreign policy. Along with this recognition for his public service, Mr. McClarty was awarded the Secretary of State's Distinguished Service Medal and the Center for the Study of the Presidency's Distinguished Service Award. I congratulate Mr. McClarty on this recognition and thank him for his lifetime of public service at the national level and at home in Arkansas. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and Arts, Conway High School, E-STEM Charter High School, Little Rock Central High School, and North Little Rock Center for Excellence for advancing to the state coding competition. Out of more than 160 teams, these 5 are part of 16 teams that were selected to advance to the state competition. The top 3 finishing teams will receive monetary awards of $2,000 for first place, $1,000 for second place, and $500 for third place for each member of the team. The money will be placed in a 529 college savings plan account to help those students with their journey towards earning a college degree. I thank our Kids Code for providing the grant money for the winning teams, and I congratulate the students for qualifying for the state competition and wish them the best of luck. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Stephen Helmick of Donald R. Roberts Elementary in Little Rock for being named the 2023 Arkansas Elementary School Principal of the Year. Mr. Helmick is known for his outgoing personality and willingness to do whatever it takes to inspire his students, including running a mile for each of the 168 fifth graders at his elementary school and camping out on the school's roof. Stephen Helmick has turned Roberts Elementary into one of the highest achieving elementary schools in Arkansas, receiving a grade of A from the state education leadership. I congratulate Mr. Helmick on his well-deserved award and the outstanding work as principal of Roberts Elementary. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Margaret Gaines, who celebrated her 100th birthday on February 19th of this year. Margaret Gaines has been a resident of Central Arkansas her entire life. She grew up in Griffithsville, Arkansas, and currently resides in Searcy, where she's lived for the past 62 years. Throughout her life, she's seen and remembers many historic events, including President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal and President John F. Kennedy's visit to Arkansas to dedicate the Greers Ferry Dam in Heber Springs. Mrs. Gaines believes the secret to her long life is plenty of exercise from gardening, which she learned to do during the Great Depression. She still grows a garden every year. Margaret Gaines, I wish you a very happy 100th birthday. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the fire chief from the Enola Area Fire Department, James Chance, who is preparing to retire. James is no ordinary fire chief. He's a volunteer who's been with the Faulkner County Department since 1973 and became chief in 1983. When he first started at the Enola Area Fire Department, they had a single brush truck to use as an engine, tanker, and rescue. The department did not have an ISO rating. Now the department has 3 stations, 11 fire trucks, and has an ISO rating of 5. According to his peers, James responded to every emergency despite how urgent or not it was. He spent 2 nights at 2 a.m. putting up barricades on flooded roads during bad storms, or responded to the 10th false medical alert alarm in the middle of the night. I thank Mr. Chance for over 50 years of selfless service to the citizens of Faulkner County and congratulate him on his retirement. Mr. Speaker, I rise to commemorate 125 years of the International Paper Company. International Paper, IP, was founded in January 1898, and they celebrated their 125th anniversary in January, an incredible milestone in our nation. Their company is committed to providing essential products that people depend on, including being one of the world's largest producers of fiber-based products. Essential paper and paper products are important in our everyday lives, ensuring goods are protected and keeping consumers safe. They're a driver of local economic development in our great state. There are over 550 IP employees and 6 facilities throughout Arkansas. 150 of those work at the Conway, Arkansas graphic plant. I congratulate International Paper for their 125 years of service, and I look forward to their continued impact on Arkansas and around the world. Mr. Speaker, it's now my pleasure to yield the balance of my time to my good friend from Texas, Mr. Weber. I thank him for his service to the people of Texas, and I appreciate the courtesy of the Speaker, and I yield my time to the gentleman from Texas.
See, of January 9, 2023, the gentleman from the great state of Texas, Mr. Weber, is recognized for the remainder of the hour as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Arkansas and his service to the people of Arkansas and the people up here in this very humble institution. Mr. Speaker, today marks the 5th year anniversary of the shooting in Santa Fe High School, where 10 innocent lives were lost at the hands of evil. We will never forget that. We will never forget that tragic day that has forever changed Santa Fe, Texas. My heart and my prayers still go out to the family and friends of those we lost, and I remain immensely grateful to the law enforcement officers who responded to that scene at their own peril. Mr. Speaker, it's often a good guy with a gun that stops the bad guy with a gun. In Santa Fe, Texas, it was a brave law enforcement officer. Let me just tell you that disarming legal gun owners will never, ever make us safer. There are, however, Mr. Speaker, steps that we can take to secure our schools without infringing on our citizens' Second Amendment rights. There's no reason why our schools should be soft targets. We clearly have the resources and the means to protect the most precious amongst us, and that's going to be our children and their teachers. Mr. Speaker, we should do everything we can to help school districts. We can hire armed professional police officers there to help protect our schools, the kids, protect their teachers and the staff. Following the shooting in Santa Fe, I participated in roundtable meetings to discuss that very thing, namely enhanced security for our schools. I heard about the need to emphasize safety in school architecture and design. We heard about ways to encourage gun owners to responsibly lock away their weapons, and the way school marshal programs can ensure that armed and trained personnel are present on those campuses. So in response, I introduced a school safety package, Mr. Speaker. The first bill in that package is the, quote, Protect Our Children's School Act, which would allow the Secretary of Education to use unspent COVID-19 funds designated for schools and localities to reprogram those funds to make our schools safer against those kinds of attacks. This money would be used to strengthen and enhance security systems already in place at those schools. The second bill, Mr. Speaker, the Protect Against School Shootings, or the PASS Act, would allow qualified law enforcement officers, retired law enforcement officers, and those permitted by state law to carry a firearm in otherwise, quote, gun-free school zones. Then there is the School Resource Officer Compensation Act, which would incentivize school districts to hire retired law enforcement officers to serve as school resource officers, or SROs, by exempting the respective school districts from the additional expense of having to pay matching Social Security contributions to anyone desiring to serve in this critical safety role. Mr. Speaker, it's a win, win, win. Schools get armed and trained by professionals. The schools can hire those professionals at a reduced rate, enjoy the additional savings. And the law enforcement officer professionals can continue to serve their communities by protecting those very kids in their communities without financial penalty. And the last bill in the package is the Securing Our Schools Act, which would enhance school security, including doubling school resource officers, hiring more school-based health counselors, and expanding the nonprofit security grant program. Mr. Speaker, I think we all agree that we need to secure our schools to ensure another senseless crime doesn't happen in our communities. Today, I pray for Santa Fe High School and the families who lost their loved ones. May 18th, 2018 will forever be ingrained in me and etched on my heart. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The chair lays before the House the following joint resolution.
House Joint Resolution 42, Joint Resolution disapproving the action of the District of Columbia Council and approving the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Amendment Act of 2022.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from the great state of Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 30 minutes, or the balance of your time, sir.
Thank you. Well, it's the time for authorizations, and one of the topics of discussion today, of course, is our armed service authorizations, military bills as we get briefings on what is necessary to defend our country from our external enemies. However, let us not forget that when Nikita Khrushchev spoke to the American public in the 1960s, he said, "We will take America without firing a shot. We will bury you." We can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until one final day they wake up and they find they're living in a communist government. Now, how could our great country, the strongest country in the world be destroyed from within. I also want to point out that when the KGB was active in this country in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, the majority of agents were not spies. They were not engaged in looking for our military secrets. They were apparently out in the open, trying to corrupt Americans into how they understood our country should be operating. They were taking advantage of our freedoms in what is supposed to be a constitution made for a moral and religious people. How would you go about destroying America from within? First of all, briefly, we would try to destroy the currency, and we know there's been wild and reckless spending recently to the degree to which our debt to GDP ratio is the highest it's been since the end of World War II. Our debt to gross national product is almost 100%. We were there at the end of World War II, but we knew at the end of World War II, millions of people were going to be laid off from the military. We were going to stop building the ships, the planes, the tanks that we needed. And sure enough, we dropped from about 100% of GDP to a little over 20% over Nixon until we began to slowly creep up again. More recently, in part because irresponsible legislation like the American Rescue Plan or the successor to Build Back Better, which we're able to pass because the Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and were able to use something called reconciliation to get it done, we have now shot back up near 100%, near an all-time high. But this time, we don't see an area in the future in which hundreds of thousands of soldiers and sailors are going to be laid off, or we're going to stop building weaponry. On the contrary to that, we do see an aging population in which the amount we spend on Social Security and Medicare is going to continue to go up. So I think you could say getting a hold of these people in this House and persuading way too many of them that spending doesn't work, we have approached an area, a crisis area, which could result in the end of the United States. Secondly, I think if I were going to destroy America, I would try to destroy the family. And beginning in the 1960s, we had a welfare program which was conditioned on keeping one parent, or largely conditioned upon, keeping one parent, usually the father, out of the house. This goal was made more apparent when Black Lives Matter, which played such a big role in the 2020 elections, in which Black Lives Matter outright came out and said they were opposed to the Western prescribed nuclear family. And of course, there was a tight alliance between Black Lives Matter and the Democrat Party. Within a few years of the Great Society in the 60s, it was apparent that the welfare system was destroying the families. Patrick Moynihan, who eventually became a senator up here, made it clear by 1970 we were destroying the families with this welfare program. But apparently, because some people wanted to destroy families, his warnings went unheeded, and we worked our way towards a higher and higher percentage of children being raised without a father in the home. And we also worked our way towards men, too many men, not having families, not having a necessary purpose in life, and therefore the crime rate went up, this sort of thing. So I think another area in which you can see people working towards communism were the people who wanted to expand this welfare state. And we all know to get so many of the programs the welfare state offers, be it low-income housing, medical care, Pell Grants, all of these things, it's kind of conditioned upon not having a man in the house. The next area that I think we have to look at, that one is destroying America from the inside, is unlimited immigration across our southern border. We right now on legal immigration, we swore in about 1 million people last year, which is the highest it's been since 2006. But varies from month to month, but But in a normal month right now, there are about 10 times the number of people coming in this country as were coming in under the prior administration. Why in the world would you allow, completely unnecessary, this was not a problem 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, why would you allow virtually unfettered immigration across our southern border unless you wanted to destroy our country? These people who come here are not necessarily educated in what it means to be an American. They do not receive a background check that includes their home countries. It is a recipe for disaster. And like I said, it's at a time when we're near record numbers of legal immigrants. We also know that the Biden administration is deporting people who commit crimes at a rate of about 1/4 that Donald Trump was. So not only are you allowing more people here, but even if you catch them doing something wrong, you don't evict them. And I think one way to destroy America is just let unlimited numbers of people come here, in this case, across the southern border. The next area that I think has to be looked at is Joe Biden's obsession with blurring the differences between the sexes, which after all is the foundation for the family. We can see the push towards transgenderism throughout all areas of society. There's a hospital near my district in which they remove the breasts of teenage girls, 15-year-old girls. They put people on puberty blockers. They give people other medications as they put it in people's minds. Boys' minds that you might not be a traditional man, girls' minds you might not be a traditional woman. This is another way, I think, to eat away at the moral fabric of America. But the area I'm going to focus on today is the Biden administration's obsession with race and trying to divide Americans by race. In his inaugural speech, I believe he mentioned racism 4 times and white supremacy once. In other words, if you have to say, what is the theme behind Joe Biden's inaugural speech, and different presidents have different themes, it's racism. He has continued along that path. When he gave his State of the Union speech here a couple months ago, he talked about racism with the police. Over the weekend, he gave a speech, I believe it was at Howard University, but some university, a graduation speech, and one more time his emphasis was that we have a major problem of white supremacy in this country. First of all, let's look at the facts. Even his premise isn't true, and then we'll look at the damage that can be done as we try to have Americans look at themselves racially, or look at themselves by where their ancestors were born 5 or 6 generations ago. If you look at countries around the world, people who come here from other than European countries, you see people succeeding wildly. And by this, I mean succeeding wildly financially. I realize finances aren't the most important thing in the world. But right now, the ethnic group that makes more money than any other in the United States, and I had this pointed out by a friend of mine who was very proud of it because he is Indian, is Indian Americans who come here, many of them, most of them, not even knowing the English language. They are mostly not Christian. They're Hindu, a few Muslim. But they come here and are wildly successful. Many other groups, Filipino, Sri Lankan, Cuban, all come here and make more money than the average American. It is so obvious that racism does not prevent people from living the American dream. Over the weekend, I spent some time with the Hmong. The Hmong are an ethnic group from Laos who helped the United States in the Vietnam War, and because they helped the United States, many of them immigrated to America. Wisconsin happens to be the state in which we have the 3rd highest number of Hmong. And I always enjoy talking with them to see how wildly successful they are. Again, this is a group that is not European, a group many of which did not know English when they came here. But when I look around my district, Hmong are almost uniformly living the American dream. Interestingly, when I talk to them, Almost all of them have formed old-fashioned nuclear families, which I think helps emotionally and spiritually with their children. And like I said, educationally, economically, across the board, the Hmong from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, Neenah, Wisconsin, I spent the weekend in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, are succeeding wildly. And that is consistent with the statistics of other ethnic groups. So, what is Joe Biden and the Democrats' response to this wild success of people from around the world? And people, by the way, who are not of European heritage. I should also point out that if a couple times I do something I enjoy doing, I go down and watch the swearing-in ceremonies of people coming here legally and becoming American citizens. They have them in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. When I go down there, almost none of the new citizens coming here are from Europe. Overwhelmingly Asia, Middle East, Sub-Saharan African, Latin America, all coming here, and when you talk to them, because they've had to be around here a few years, they all already are successful, also proud to become Americans. None are running away from this country, and none of them mention racism as a problem. But, again, further evidence that we shouldn't have a problem. Now, how has the Biden administration met with this situation, and how has our government as a whole over the last 50 years dealt with this situation? Well, first of all, at the beginning of Joe Biden's term, 2 or 3 months in, we had 2 Democrat senators, Tammy Duckworth and Mazie Hirono, at a time when the Senate was 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats, so every vote was necessary for Joe Biden to get his nominees appointed. They came out and said that they were not going to vote for any more white men who were nominated to positions. Kind of a shocking thing. And then they met with Joe Biden, who I assume held their hands. Oh, by the way, they said they'd accept white men if they were gay. I assume held their hands and said there were a few white guys who he had to allow in his administration. But nevertheless, an obscure legal journal did some studying after the first 2 years of the Biden administration, and they looked at the 97 new judges, which are some of the appointments the president has to make. And when they looked at the 97 judges, I would have expected maybe 25 or 30 being white men, which would have been, I think, lower than if you just picked the number of lawyers across the board. Lawyers say over the age of 35 to be judges. But I would have guessed 20 or 25, and I would have thought, that's clearly too low. It was 5. Only 5 of 97 judges appointed in Joe Biden's first year were white men, and of those, 2 that we could find out happened to be gay, something that's been hidden by the American Press Corps. I'm not sure how typical this is of his other appointments, but clearly Joe Biden is using this as a tool to discriminate or to divide Americans. He is also, in his proposed budget, adding new employees in every agency, commerce, interior, education, wherever you look, to enforce this sort of racial identification. I'm sure he plans on them weighing in as to who gets new jobs. I'm sure he plans on them weighing in who gets grants as municipalities around the country or businesses compete for grants. This is another way in which Joe Biden clearly, his actions are meeting his words. He wants to turn America into a country of competing ethnic groups. Another thing he's doing that has been underpublicized, right now, for the purpose of determining whether a group needs preferences or not, we look at Asians, and by Asians we mean people coming all the way from Japan, around Asia, all the way through Pakistan, but not Iran. We mean people from Sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, Tanzania, countries like that. We mean Latin America, which could mean Cubans, it could mean Colombians, could mean Haitians, whatever. These people get preferences. But you'll notice, and by the way, they get preferences over the native born. If somebody shows up here from Nigeria, if somebody shows up here from Bolivia, for the purposes of the forms that American businesses have to fill out, or that universities may fill out, these people who just arrive here get preferences over the native born. And that's true even if they're wildly wealthy when they come here. If I'm a Cuban who comes here worth $1 million or well off in Cuba, planning to be a doctor in the United States, I will right away get preferences on these forms over Americans who have been here for generations. So President Biden, however, wants to add another group that can walk around with a chip on their shoulder and be told that they're discriminated against. Those are people from the Arab world. Because right now, people from Syria, people from Algeria, people from Egypt are not considered minorities. They don't get special treatment. Well, President Biden has made it clear that in the future he's taking the first administrative steps to say this group should identify by their ethnicity, identify by where they come from, and of course when the bean counters in the universities, the bean counters doing the hiring on the federal government, when they get hold of these people, they will look to give them preferences to, because they're supposedly picked on by not being of European heritage. I think a lot of Americans do not realize that this affirmative action has been around for quite some time. Affirmative action in general really was promoted a lot beginning 1965, which is to say about 58 years ago, 57 years ago, we'll say. Thomas Sowell has written about affirmative action around the globe, and of course affirmative action was originally supposed to be temporary for people of African American descent. Well, like affirmative action programs all over the world, it was not temporary. We've had it for 75 years. And not only is it temporary, but you have a bureaucracy growing up promoting this affirmative action, and as it expanded from where it initially was to include other areas, right? It was expanded to include Asians, it was expanded to include Latin Americans, it was expanded to include women. So right now, for the purposes of forms, having talked to people who deal with this in human resources departments around the country, all these other groups are supposedly or sometimes advised to get preference. The first time I ran across this, and I'll digress for 1 second, you're supposed to fill out a form called the EEO1 if you have either 100 employees or less than that and you contract with the government, okay? And I first ran across this when I was contacted by a human resources woman, and they had to fill out the EEO1. I think in part they had over 100 employees, but they also sold some of their product. They were a manufacturer, sold some of their product to the federal government. And she said the firm that they hired to see how to deal with this relationship with the federal government, there was a situation in which they had 4 or 5 engineers. They wanted to hire a 5th or 6th engineer, and they were advised by this group that that they should hire a woman. They didn't have to hire a woman, but if they didn't hire a woman and the federal government looked at them, they may get in trouble for not hiring a woman. So they gave them a card of somewhere, some group referred to something like the Wisconsin Association of Female Engineers, and were told you should hire a woman. Then they wanted to hire another member of management, and the same group told them, you know, you don't have to hire a minority, but if you don't hire a minority, you might get in trouble. So you should look around and see what you can do to hire a minority. So, and this I saw 20, would have been about 20 years ago that I dealt with this situation. It's been around for over 50 years. Again, a goal apparently of which, since we don't have a big prejudice problem in this country, is to try to encourage people to walk around with a chip on their shoulder or ask for something because of their ethnicity. There are a variety of what I think are ridiculous rules that, in addition to the fact that it's wrong on its face, that we should look at regarding this affirmative action program. First of all, you self-identify. Now, in an extreme example of that, the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, felt that she was, I don't know, a 64th or 128th Native American, so she should get preferences. But it's more common to have somebody who's maybe 1/4 something to self-identify as, let's say, Latin American or something. And in this new world in which we have all these overpaid bureaucrats, both in private industry and in the government, by identifying, let's say, you're 1/4 Cuban, you have the potential to get preferences. Now, that's just divisive. It's ridiculous on its face. It also doesn't matter how wealthy you are. Like I said, you could be Barack Obama's daughters, worth millions and millions of dollars, but you fill out the form, and for the purposes of university admissions, for the purposes of federal employment, you're treated as somebody put upon, somebody who should walk around with a chip on your shoulder, somebody should get preferences. In any event, I think it's something that the American public should be aware of and look to end. These programs were originally designed only for Black Americans, and when they began well over 60 years ago, it was supposed to be something that was temporary. Instead, Joe Biden, I believe, is using it, the progressives are using it to try to divide America, to try to create a situation in which our future elections are contests between ethnic groups. America is unique in that I think so far in our existence, people view themselves as Americans above all. And when they go to vote, they vote on issues. How much should we be spending on the military? How much should we be spending on transportation? Maybe social issues. Abortion has recently been a big issue. Taxation, how we should deal with taxation. But the people who push this, I think, are causing people to vote and say, which politician is giving me more because of where my ancestry is from? I think that is motivation. It's very dangerous. It's always been a problem in other countries where we have affirmative action. I've mentioned before, Thomas Sowell wrote a book about affirmative action, an older book today, but it's as fresh today as when he originally wrote it, in which he talked about when governments don't treat people equally, but when they are supposed to pick between different groups, those countries break down. I've always felt one of the problems with Canada getting together a decent government is, of course, they're divided by language. And they've got a French part of Canada and an English part of Canada. But there are other areas in which their outright civil war breaks out. In Nigeria, where you have different ethnic groups, different tribes, not only different tribes, but different religion, Muslim in the north, Christian in the south, they've always had problems. I remember when I was in high school, there was a war over Biafra, in which there tried to be a breakaway in Nigeria. And to a certain extent, the hard feelings in Nigeria were encouraged by affirmative action sort of programs. Same thing in Sri Lanka, a country before they had affirmative action, they had different ethnic groups, they got along fabulously. Once the idea got in there that the government should pick and choose people based on their ethnicity, they had a civil war, and for a relatively tiny country, over 30,000 people died. India, one of the difficult things this incredibly smart and resourceful people have had in getting together a good country is it's divided between dozens of ethnic groups, certainly big religious divide between Hindu and Muslim, and that has really hampered India. They're trying to deal with it. They sometimes deal with it through affirmative action-like programs, and of course, that just increases the hard feelings they have in that country. Same thing is true with Malaysia, another country. They have to deal with the Chinese and the native Malays, and only results in trouble and hard feelings when we go down this affirmative action path. There are other areas, for whatever reason in society, even without prompting from the government, in which we are judging people where their ancestors came from. There's a good book out there right now by Heather McDonald talking about efforts made to get rid of standardized testing to get into medical school. Well, I had always thought that the smartest kids are the ones who became doctors. But it seems some of these bean counters don't like that. They would rather focus on where people's ancestors came from rather than how good you do on the standardized tests. And as the result, there are medical schools which are getting rid of standardized tests altogether. So we're no longer getting the smartest kids to be doctors, or in some medical schools we aren't. Instead, we wind up with kids getting into medical school in part based on an essay, and the more woke the essay, the better. But again, this idea about judging people for their ancestries is not only going to be unfair to people, but it's going to result in doctors who are no longer the best in their class. It's going to be doctors who filled out the essay the most or who did the most volunteer work or something. And it's inevitably going to result in a decline in the quality of American medicine. Just like as we push more affirmative action in American manufacturing, push it more in important federal jobs, push it more on the judiciary instead of just merit, we're going to wind up with a less competent judiciary, less competent manufacturing firms, less competent professors, and it will result in a decline in America. But I do believe it is being pushed by the same people who are pushing our welfare state, the same people who are for unfettered immigration, the same people who are trying to destroy the nuclear family, the same people who are trying to blur the differences between the sexes. And each one of these things are a march towards destroying America from within, as Nikita Khrushchev warned us and promised us 50 years ago. So I encourage our negotiators, when it comes time to negotiate the appropriation bills, to take out the provisions that Joe Biden has to increase the amount of racial enmity around the country. I encourage the colleges and universities around the country to not fall for this idea that people's identity is based on where their ancestors came many years ago. I mean, think of this. I can grow up next to a Cuban family. I can have my best friend being, a son of the Cuban family. We can go to the same schools together. We can play on the same basketball team together. But somehow these bean counters say you're such different people because your great-great-grandparents lived in Cuba and your great-great-great-great-grandparents live in Germany. So we see such a diverse group of people. So we encourage, like I said, our negotiators to take that out. We encourage the benefactors of the universities around the country to not allow this to happen there. And we encourage people to get rid of these affirmative action programs. One other way, by the way, that they hurt America is they encourage what I think are lying. I ran into a guy recently from my district who had a job, and had a business. He knew a lot of other people in a similar business who had their wives named as the owner of the company. And so they lied. My friend, a good, honest Christian, wasn't going to lie and pretend that his wife owned the company, so he didn't get advantage of this. But in any event, those are my requests, things that the American press corps should be paying attention to but aren't. And now, Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn. Oh.
Gentleman was suspended.
Oh, and I guess I got to say this too. I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Education and Workforce be permitted to file its report to accompany House Joint Resolution 45 at any time today, May 18th. And after that, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Without objection. The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Well, the ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until noon on Monday next for morning hour debate.